is going to talk about how to process webhook events in Okta Workflows. Now, before I sort of give him the stage, a few quick things I want to say. So this event is being recorded, and then a recording will be available right on Crowdcast when we end the session, and then we will also upload the recording to YouTube. And then sometime tomorrow, we'll send you a message with resources and also a link to that YouTube recording. And then we'll include any other resources that we mentioned. If you have questions, please, you can put them in chat. So the chat is on the right-hand side. There's also a Q&A section. You can put your questions there. And I think that's it. So Ajay, the stage is yours.
Okay, thank you, Max. Great to be here with you today. So I'm a principal solution architect here at Okta, based out of the San Francisco office. And I'm really excited about Okta Workflows. I've seen the adoption of this product as we rolled it out for workforce identity and then business partner applications over time. And it is an awesome platform. It's a no-code platform, which really appeals to me because I'm not really very good at coding. And I like the fact that Okta hosts all the logic. So I don't have to go about trying to think about where to host my custom code. It's a no-code platform specifically tuned for identity-centric processes. What we're going to cover today is how we can use this amazing feature of Okta Workflows as a webhook. So we come up with examples commonly in our day-to-day work where, for example, we want to register a webhook in ServiceNow, perhaps, an ITSM system, or as a part of an identity proofing solution, as we want to track the user going through that identity proofing journey. So there are numerous examples, but for the purposes of today, what we will do is we will use a specific example of Okta events. And that way, I get to show you an early access feature that we have of event hook filtering. Now, I will come back to this slide later if we have some time to talk through about different design options for taking action on Okta events. But what we're really focused on today is one particular path. We're going to register an Okta Workflows API endpoint with Okta for application assignment events. So let's jump right in to the product. For your own org, if you go over to settings and features, the feature that I'm using here, which is in early access, is called event hook filtering. So it allows the addition of filters to event hooks. I have set up a simple application for the purposes of using an application assignment event. So let's get started. You can think about Okta Workflows very simply as when this event happens, based on some conditional logic, take some action. So what is the motivation for an event hook with Okta? Especially because we already support a lot of cards that you can use to trigger an Okta workflow based on Okta events. Think about that for an instant. So let me give you a simple card where we have user profile updated, right? So now this is a card that is really helpful for us because it already pre-parses out all the fields and makes it available in a really nice package. The challenge is that we have every profile attribute of the Okta user when it gets updated, this will be triggered. But sometimes that is just too much information. And what we want to do is be able to have a filter so that we can only receive specific events for specific attribute changes. That's one example. Now, coming back to my specific example, if I look at the app assignment event, I have to predetermine which application is of interest to me. In one particular use case that has become really popular these days, where we want to track events for a set of applications, assignments, this model would mean that I would have to set up many workflows, one for each application. Instead, what I could do is use this event hook approach. So it's really simple. You go into Okta Workflows, you pick a different trigger. So the trigger in this case will be an API endpoint, and we're going to expose it as a webhook. When we close and save. So now I've turned the flow on. When I come back to the endpoint settings, you will notice that Okta Workflows has generated a client token, right? And so we would use this particular invoke URL as that API endpoint for this particular event. Now, let me copy this, go over to actually registering this API endpoint as an event hook. So this becomes my endpoint URL. For the purposes of this demo, I'm going to skip these fields and then choose user assigned to application. Now with this early access feature, we can actually filter for specific applications. We provide an option to formulate based on a configuration type user interface. But for the purposes of this demo, let me go ahead and show you the advanced option. So what I want to do here is I want to choose a particular application assignment. So let me grab this. Now notice, for instance, I can write some conditional logic with ors and ands and so on. And that is really handy because I can formulate quite a lot with an expression language expression. So let me go back, grab this application ID, and that's a really handy trick of just looking at the URL and grabbing the application ID here. So, okay, let's save and continue. So now I actually have the ability to preview it. So let me go ahead and choose that. And I can actually see what the payload is going to look like. So it says, I have the event type and I have this data events. So when I'm actually using Okta Workflows as an API endpoint, but as a webhook, we have to understand what the semantics of that webhook is going to look like from that system. So in the case of Okta, I would look at this documentation for event hooks, and I can see a couple of points that jump out at me right away. There's a one-time verification request, but because it is an Okta Workflow API endpoint, that verification request is handled automatically for you. If I were writing custom code, that would be extra code for that verification. But let me look at this ongoing event delivery piece. It says that delivery, you may have multiple requests at the same time. So in one call that Okta makes to that API endpoint, there may be a batch of events. And we also have a default timeout enforced of 3 seconds, which means that we should respond right away within that 3-second window. So what that means is I would have to, first of all, make sure that I respond to Okta right away. For that, I'm going to pick out the API connector, close, and I'll send a status code back of 204, no content. Let me save this, come back to my event hook, and just test that out. Looks like I'm on the right track here. I've got the headers, I've got the body. The body reflects what I saw in that preview pane there on the event hook page. And I can see that I've got the data events. And this data events is an array, right? So the next thing that I'm going to do is go ahead and parse out the body. So I'll use a JSON parse. And as you can see, it's a very simple environment. I'm just adding cards on a graphical editor. I can drag and drop fields from one to the other. I get my output. So the next thing that I'll do is I will extract out those events. So I come over here, pick object, so I'm going to get. And then what this results in is a list of objects. So it's an object type, and I would select list. So you notice how this icon changes? That gives you a visual indicator of the data type that we're using. So in this case, this is an object, this is a text, and this is a list of objects. Okay, so now that we have got these events, we want to iterate through it. In a programming paradigm, that's a for loop. So because I have a list, let me go and look at what some of the options would be for a list processing. There are a lot of functions here. So for the purposes of this demo, I'm just going to choose for each and ignore errors. I'm going to drag and drop this field over. And what I have to decide now is what the logic is for each of those events. So this is going to go through a loop. There's some pretty powerful features of being able to adjust the concurrency as well. But for this demo, I'll just go ahead and set it to 1, and let's create a helper flow. So the helper flow is like a function, a reusable function in a programming language. So let me go ahead and say this is my event. And this one is going to be of type object. So I go ahead and just set that to be an object. Okay, and then turn the flow on. Come back over here, and now I will choose that flow. And save. Okay, so now what I have, if I were to just sort of look at it in a flowchart, I have an API endpoint. We have registered that as a webhook in Okta. We close the connection right away. That way, Okta knows that the Workflows engine has received the event. We parse out the body that we got. And because the Okta semantics are that we could have a batch of events delivered, we get that batch of events by looking at the payload, and then we iterate through each of the events and process them. So let's see this in action. So you'll notice that if I were writing custom code, I would have to go through an Okta verification. But in this particular case, it happens automatically because it's an Okta Workflows API endpoint. Let me come over to my sample app now. I'm going to test it with one assignment. I have about 6 users here, but let me start with one. As you can see now, I have my first test, and then I have a successful invocation from this app assignment. So let me go ahead, look at this. I got data events, and there was only one event this time. And when I look at the other flow, I wanted to actually look at the other flow, so process each event. You can see that this got called bots. I like this numbering style. It helps me sort of sort and quickly get a sense of how my flows are laid out. So this app assignment event, process each event. Another best practice that I've seen with some customers is they like to keep all of the triggers of in the workflows that are the initial triggers in one separate folder. Different approaches.
Ajay,
Now,
we have a tip. You published a tip probably last year on the
that is
structure.
Right. Good point. You have a good memory there. Yep.
Yes. I can find it, and then I'll put a link in the chat.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. So the next thing that I do here is I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to just remove this. And let me go ahead and show you a case where Okta is going to deliver these events, but as a batch. So in order to do that, I'm going to assign it to the everyone group. Okay, so you can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 users. I'm going to refresh my screen here. So each of those generates an event. Let me go ahead and look at this one. Okay, so you can see that first one was just the preview payload. This one was my test with one individual user. And now I actually have just 2 invocations of this particular workflow. So keep in mind, I had 6 users. The reason I have only 2 here is because Okta batched up those app assignment events and delivered it to the Workflows API endpoint. So let's take a look. So data events is an array, right? Data events is an array, right? So now over here, when I come over to the next one, processing each event, you can see now that I have all of these events processed individually, right? Okay, so this is an example of how we are processing events using an Okta Workflows API endpoint. We have looked at how we register that workflow API endpoint, and we have filtered the events. So this is part of multitude design options that you could consider for implementing a particular use case. We also saw an example. We used Okta Workflow event hooks as the example here And we looked at how we would look at what that default timeout is, whether those events are going to be delivered individually or as batches, in order to be able to design our workflows logic. Now, let me take a step back and give you a perspective. So in Okta, we have users assigned to, we have Okta users, we have them assigned to groups, we have them assigned to applications. Perhaps that application is a custom application for which you have written your own Skim connector. All of those app assignments generate entries in syslog. There are multiple ways that we can process these events. So one option is we can poll syslog, and we can write custom code for that. A new feature that we have introduced is we can stream these syslog entries over to Amazon Event Bridge or Splunk, for example, and then process them using a serverless architecture. Again, that means we're writing some bunch of code here. We have selected events that we have a workflows card already pre-created for us so that we can use that to trigger a workflow. We could have a schedule that polls syslog with a sliding time window to be able to pick out syslog. What we looked at today was having an Okta Workflows API endpoint registers as a webhook with a filter that we defined using expression language. This approach has some considerations to be kept in mind. There's a maximum number of event hooks that you can register in Okta. There is a maximum number of events that will be delivered in a 24-hour period. You can look at the documentation for that, but think of that like a rate limit. So that's where this having the ability to filter comes in very handy. So with that, that concludes what I wanted to share with you today, and hopefully it provides perspective, but you've also seen how we would actually implement that using Okta Workflows. Max, are there questions on chat?
Yeah, so there's one question, although I think the answer was provided. So the question, I'll read it to you, but perhaps you can comment. But so Troy says that he tried to create a hook event filtering example for one specific group, but then when the hook would always send 2 events each time.
Yep.
Are you familiar? So and then another so Shyam, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but said that it's a known bug. Do you know anything?
Not particularly aware, but the one thing that I will point to is when you look at the event hooks and read the documentation, it is important to take care of both of these things. Being able to tell Okta Workflows, the Okta engine, that the event has been received is very important. And what I've seen a lot of folks do is miss out on being able to put in that first API close so that we close the connection and then we continue. So that is a very important thing to do. And then making sure that you're aware that these events could be batched up is another piece that I see a lot of people sort of just missing. And so keep in mind that if you make the assumption that you're only going to get one event at a time, you will just not process the events that are delivered as a batch. So these are the 2 common things that are overlooked, and that's what I wanted to highlight today.
Very good, thank you. So Troy, I hope this helps. And if you still If you're still running into problems, of course, support, it looks like you created a ticket, so that's great, but you can also reach out to me. You've got my email, and I'll share it. I think that the next slide has my email, and then yeah, we'll resolve this. And I see, so another question, can you put the documentation URL in the chat? Is it documentation for workflows in general? Sure, I can, give me a sec. I can do that. Also, so there is a link. If you see there's a green button in the bottom center of your screen, and that's a link to the Workflows Builder community page. And this page has everything you need for workflows, including documentation. But let me quickly send you a direct link to documentation here. All right.
I've heard this thing about, oh, there's a bug many, many times. And I would really encourage you to check your logic. Even if you've written custom code, the same principles apply.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely. Right. Well, we have another event coming up in June, and that's making API requests in Okta Workflows. So I'll be showing 3 ways to make an API request. Oh, AJ, I think the sharing disappeared.
Right. Oh, I can just put the email address that you had in chat as well.
Yeah, I think the slide. Are you still able to go back, share the slide, just for another 5 seconds?
Yep, you got it.
You got it? Okay, thank you. Here we go. Yeah, so we'll be talking about 3 ways to make an API request using the built-in cards, using the built-in custom action. Also, it's a built-in, and then using a kind of a raw HTTP request. So that's coming up in June. Then my email is there. So, and I can also put it, let me just put it in chat. I know it might be a little bit small there, but if you have any questions, please send me an email. And then also to register for this event, so you're on Crowdcast right now. So if you go to our channel, you'll be able to register for this, for the upcoming event. And also, if you want to follow us on Crowdcast, that's another option. And then even if you don't register for an event, when we go live, you'll be notified that, hey, Okta Workflows went live. And if you find the topic interesting, you can always join. So again, you won't have to register for each event, but you'll be notified when we do go live. Well, very good. Let us know if you have any last questions. But Ajay, thank you so much for joining us today. And then we should definitely have you back, sometime in the near future, covering again perhaps another topic.
Absolutely.
I see a comment from. Sorry, Ajay, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I'm reading this comment from Stefan, and it's just really that you should join the Mac Admins Okta Slack channel. So absolutely. So the link is available from the Workflows Builder community page, but it's there's an Okta Workflows channel in that Slack workspace. Very active. People post questions, and sometimes almost immediately someone will post a response, which is pretty incredible. So definitely join that Slack channel to get help and and see what other workflows builders are doing. Well, very good. I don't see any more questions. So again, thank you everyone for joining us today. And Ajay, again, thanks for hosting with us.
This was fun.
Awesome. Let's keep it. All right, very good. Thank you. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.